that has a little more weight to it than other people who speak about war. And I think we're in a position to, talk, well, in a sense we're in a position to speak, as I did in Washington, for the dead, who are not here to speak for themselves, speak for the people we knew who died and the people we didn't know who died in wars. We're in a position to speak for all those who were injured in wars and who are not speaking for themselves. And we're here even to speak for all the hidden casualties of war. The people who come back and they're alive and they don't have any apparent injuries. They have their arms and their legs, but they're in some way their lives have been distorted by the war that they're in. And we're in a position to speak for those people, say something for them, because the people in Washington don't care about them. All those people who came back from Vietnam, and of course some of them came back in wheelchairs, and some of you are in wheelchairs, and some of them came back without arms and legs, and so on. And there are others who came back apparently whole, but not really whole. And I remember being startled when I read that statistic, which I'm sure most everybody knows, and which shocks you when you read it, that more veterans since the Vietnam War, more veterans have committed suicide than died in the war. You see, it's a shocking thought, you see. But and remember in the Gulf War, and remember how our authorities bragged about how few casualties we had in the Gulf, a few hundred casualties and so on. But in the 10 years that followed the Gulf War, thousands of veterans of the Gulf War died, according to the Veterans Administration. Thousands were dead. These were young people. And 200,000 of the 600,000 Gulf War veterans, and this is according to VA figures, 200,000 applied for disability, and 150,000 of them were granted. These are all the casualties of war. And we're also in a position, I think, this is something that isn't done, really. It certainly isn't done by the military high brass, and it isn't done by the White House high brass, and to remind people not just of our casualties, but of the casualties on the other side, which we don't think of. Which we're not trained to think of, and which in fact, and many of you have had the same experience I did, and when I was flying bombing missions, I was not aware, I didn't think about the human beings who were down there on the receiving end of these bombs. Simply didn't think about them. And we can understand, those of us who have that experience can understand how soldiers can commit atrocities. Ordinary soldiers can commit atrocities and not think about what they're doing. But we're away from that now. We can think about it, and we can talk about it, and it's our duty to talk about the people on the other side who are the victims of our wars. So something special, that we need to do. And of course, we're in a position to talk about the reality of war. And by the reality of war, I mean away from the abstractions and away from the euphemisms and away from the promises and the war for democracy, a war for liberty, all those words that are used, and to confront people with, this is what war is. This is what war is like. We're in a better position to expose the lies of the government. I remember, of all people, Kipling, the great imperialist, said but he acknowledged some things, you know. And at one point he wrote, I think, this little couplet: if any ask why we died, tell them because our fathers lied. Wow. Yeah. So for a moment I had a soft feeling for Kipling. Well, we're in a position to explain to people and to talk gently to young people and to everybody about the difference between fighting for your country and fighting for your government. The difference between fighting for people, for human beings, and fighting for Halliburton, fighting for the profiteers, fighting for the war makers. Big difference. We're in a position to talk about patriotism and how patriotism does not mean simply going along with what your government does, but patriotism means supporting the principles for which your government is supposed to stand. I mean, that's the whole idea. That's what the democratic philosophy is, as expressed in the Declaration of Independence. Governments are artificial creations. Governments are not holy. Governments are set up, according to the Declaration of Independence, governments are set up by the people in order to bring about certain things: equality, equal right to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. And when governments become destructive of those ends, the language of the Declaration, then it is the right of the people to alter or abolish the government. I think we can also, we're in a position to talk about heroism, you know, because there's all this, World War II, of course, is, you know, the greatest generation, and we've been absolutely submerged in World War II nostalgia and the landings on D-Day and the Band of Brothers and all of that, you know. Somehow there's, you know, something about that, you know, which is sort of very troubling to anybody, you know, anybody who really thinks about what heroism is. I remember when I left the Air Force, I got this letter from General Marshall, personal letter addressed to 16 million guys and a few women who had been in the military. And a letter, you know, thanked me, congratulated me for being part of this great effort to win the war, and how now it was going to be a great new world. You know, world. I mean, after all, 50 million people died in the war, the last sacrifice. It has to be a great new world. Well, as we know, it has not been a great new world. We've not seen the end of war. We have not seen the end of fascism. We've not seen the end of militarism. But it seems to me that what we are about, what we are trying to do, us veterans, non-veterans, all of us who gather today opposing, you know, the present war, you know, we are trying finally to fulfill that promise that was made to us to create a world without war and with justice. Thank you.